Hello, I'm Sharon Tong. Welcome to In Parliament. Several MPs tabled questions on the corruption probe into two senior officers. In his reply, Deputy Prime Minister and Home Affairs Minister Teo Chee Hean reiterated that there was no delay in the release of information on the case. The head of the Central Narcotics Bureau was arrested on 19th December, while the chief of the Civil Defence was arrested on 4th January. Mr. Teo said time had to be given for investigations to take place. It was only on 20th January, the Friday before the Lunar New Year break, that the ministry was informed there was sufficient grounds for civil service disciplinary action to be taken. The ministry then decided to suspend the two officers and go public with the case.
Due process in both the investigations and disciplinary proceedings have to be followed to avoid prejudicing any subsequent legal or civil service disciplinary proceedings, as well as to be fair to the officers accused. A premature release of information in such cases would jeopardize the investigations and also unfairly prejudice the officers and any other parties who are involved in the case.
May I ask a supplementary question, please? Whether DPM thinks that the two CPIB investigations and the recent probes into allegations of vice activities involving public servants reflects a lowering of the moral and ethical standards to which members of our public service are held.
The government is committed to upholding high moral and ethical standards in the public service. When we come across an officer who has transgressed, we will not hesitate to act against him, even if he's in a senior position and even if it may embarrass the government.
Mr. Teo also gave the assurance that there are channels for civil service and home team officers to report acts of misconduct. Identities of whistleblowers are kept strictly confidential, and these guidelines are contained in the Code of Conduct issued to all officers. Mr. Teo said in the last 5 years, 59 cases of misconduct were reported, of which 44 were made anonymously. He said all officers are expected to flag cases of wrongdoing, even if it is against a superior officer.
However, even in the best of systems, no one can guarantee that corruption or wrongdoing can be entirely eradicated and that there will never be cases of misconduct, as there will always be human failings, human weaknesses, which we may discover later.
Parliament has passed amendments to the Legal Profession Bill aimed at liberalising the legal industry in Singapore. The changes make it more flexible for Singapore law firms to collaborate with foreign practices. It also provides a means to enforce mandatory continuing professional development for lawyers. And finally, the amendments will make it easier for foreign experts like Queen's counsels to appear in Singapore courts. But members of Parliament were concerned about how the changes would impact Singapore's legal landscape.
So there are of course many pros and cons to keeping the door ajar for a Queen's Counsel. A natural response would be that opening the door to them could take away work from local lawyers, to say nothing of experience and so forth. This concern should not be taken lightly. But to mitigate this, any individual or corporate who seeks redress in a local court should expect to make it clear to the bench why he or she needs a foreign lawyer, regardless if the case involves commercial law or local law.
An increased presence of international firms could also affect the ability of local firms to obtain high-quality hires, as they cannot afford to compete with the starting salary often offered by these larger firms. This may mean fewer quality graduates entering into domestic disciplines such as family law and criminal law. These areas tend to be dominated by smaller firms, which are already struggling today to find lawyers to hire.
There will be a legitimate question that the government will have to answer as to why do you have opening up in the banking sector, in the accounting sector, in so many sectors, and as a result you get all of them coming into Singapore and employing Singaporeans, providing job opportunities. And why is the legal sector so special that it needs to be protected completely? Unless members can offer a compelling answer to that question, I think the answer must be that we have no choice but to open up.
Also passed an amendment to the Evidence Act, allowing the courts greater discretion over the kinds of evidence allowed. One effect is that the sexual history of a rape victim can no longer be automatically admitted as evidence and used against her in court. Law Minister K. Shanmugam said now the court will decide when such evidence is admissible. Other changes to the Act include allowing hearsay to serve as evidence. Hearsay refers to statements made by a person who is not called to court as a witness.
What we are doing now is not, therefore, to allow in what was previously not allowed, but to give the courts a discretion to sieve through the evidence, to see which parts should be allowed, if the judge believes that to be in the interest of the justice in the particular case.
The Trade and Industry Ministry is proposing changes to a legislation aimed at protecting consumers against unfair business practices. One of them is the introduction of a burden of proof in the Consumer Protection Fair Trading Act. For example, if a defect is found in a product within 6 months of delivery, it is assumed the defect existed at the time of delivery. It is then up to the retailer to prove otherwise. In such cases, the consumer can ask the retailer to repair or replace the product. If the retailer fails to do either, consumers may bring the matter to the Small Claims Tribunal. The amendments, targeted to take effect in September, are designed to make commercial transactions more transparent. Now, during question time, the Health Ministry says it will increase the number of high dependency and intensive care hospital beds for the critically ill. Health Minister Gan Kim Yong says this will be done in tandem with increasing the number of beds in public hospitals overall. Currently, these beds make up 9.4% of hospital beds in service. The occupancy rate for high dependency beds in 2011 was 60%, while that for ICU was 73%. Mr. Gan said healthcare institutions are also looking at other ways to increase effective hospital space.
We also have to look at various measures to manage the demand in the hospitals. For example, right siting is very important. We want to make sure that only those who need to be hospitalized will be hospitalized. Patients who can be cared for in community hospitals, in nursing homes, or even at home, we should find ways to encourage them.
Families facing financial hardship who need urgent accommodation are housed temporarily under the HDB's Interim Rental Housing or IRH scheme. Senior Parliamentary Secretary for National Development Dr. Maliki Osman said IRH is a temporary measure for families in transition as they look for long-term housing, and sharing flats helps families reduce their rental costs. There are currently some 1,000 IRH rental units which are 3-room or larger flats. These are old HDB blocks which are vacated pending demolition.
Understandably, co-sharing arrangement is not preferred, but it is manageable provided the tenants exercise tolerance with families. It will take into account factors such as race, religion, and family size. HDB will also proactively get the families to meet up before they are paired. This should help to improve the chance of successful co-sharing.
Over the last 3 years, HDB has taken action against 179 flat owners for unauthorized subletting. Of these, 8 flats were owned by permanent residents. Senior Parliamentary Secretary from the Ministry of National Development, Maliki Osman, revealed this in response to queries from Ang Mo Kio MP Ang Hin Kee. Mr. Maliki stressed that owners must attain an approval from HDB before subletting their flats. He said other measures are in place to prevent unauthorized subletting. This includes conducting flat inspections. Public feedback also played a key role.
We provide a dedicated hotline for members of the public to provide feedback on unauthorized subletting of these flats. In fact, many times we take action and investigate it based on feedback from the residents living within the vicinity of that subletted flat. On the penalties, HDB can and has compulsory acquired flats which have been unauthorized subletted, or in lieu of compulsory acquisition, we impose a fine.
Foreign Affairs Minister K. Shanmugam says Singapore hopes to develop more links with Myanmar as the country opens up economically and politically. Mr. Shanmugam was responding to queries about the state of bilateral relations with Myanmar and whether ASEAN has set progress targets for Myanmar before it takes over that chair of ASEAN in 2014. He said Singapore and Myanmar enjoy good and long-standing bilateral relations and welcomes Myanmar's chairmanship of ASEAN in 2014.
As ASEAN chair, Myanmar will be the external face of ASEAN. It will have to defend not only its own interests and record, but also ASEAN's interests. Myanmar will also have to reassure our external partners that under its chairmanship, ASEAN would continue to make progress towards an ASEAN community in 2015. The world will be watching. Given the stakes, I'm confident that Myanmar will work hard to make its ASEAN chairmanship a success. Singapore will offer to work with Myanmar to ensure successful outcomes under its 2014 chairmanship.
Acting Minister of Community Development Chan Chun Sing says the Office of the Commissioner of Charities will look into refining the rules and regulations related to fundraising activities. This will be done to ensure greater transparency and accountability. The move comes after public feedback on the recent Elephant Parade initiative by a commercial company. The project aimed to raise public awareness and support for elephant conservation projects in Asia. Under the initiative, life-size statues of elephants were sold at a private auction. Mr. Chan said it was not a pure charity fundraising event where the bulk of the proceeds go to charities, but some had thought otherwise. So rules will have to be tightened as fundraising activities by commercial companies are becoming more common.
This will include making clearer distinctions between sale of merchandise with partial donations of proceeds and charity fundraising, as well as between public and private fundraising. It will also consider amending the rules for private fundraising, including the extent of public visibility, whether in the form of media publicity or public displays.
Parliament has sworn in the 9 new nominated MPs. They come from diverse backgrounds ranging from the arts, sports and social services sector, among others. A minute's silence was held to honour the memory of former Deputy Prime Minister Dr. Toh Chin Chye. Dr. Toh died on 3rd February, aged 90. In his tribute to the man regarded as one of the founding fathers of modern Singapore, Speaker Michael Palmer said Dr. Toh was known for his integrity, tenacity and his unwavering determination to serve the country.
Succeeding generations owe much to the dedication and toil of visionary leaders like Dr. Toh, whose distinguished contributions to Singapore and to this House will always be remembered.
Parliament will sit again on Friday. That's when Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Tharman Shanmugaratnam will deliver the Budget 2012 speech. Good night.